And now we're on to our main topic today here on Mastering Dungeons. We are going to talk about growing the industry, inserting yourself into the industry, and what conventions have to do with those topics. So Teos and I get a lot of questions about how do I break into the industry? Or I publish some things, but I want to take the next step. Or right, give me any advice on how I can do what I see my game designing allies and friends doing. And it is a very, very, very tough nut to crack. With the reception that we got at Gamehole Con, we wanted to tackle this question again, looking at it specifically with regards to conventions and community opportunities. So we're going to sort of go from the very basics of game design, industry, and professionals to what conventions might mean in that process. You down with that, Teos?
Absolutely. I love it.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with a question. So you want to be a professional game designer.
Mm-hmm.
My first question is why? And I am actually going to start. I answered this question 3 times this weekend in emails to different people. And after the third time, I went, my first question should be why? You can probably do anything else and make as much money as you can in game design.
Yeah.
It is not a large, lucrative, well-funded, well-established enterprise at the best of times. At the worst of times, you are going to be lucky to make anything. Leading to the joke, what's the difference between a game designer and a large pizza? A large pizza can support a family of 4.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or feed. I blew it. It's feed a family of 4.
Yeah. No, it still works.
And it's not wrong. It's not wrong. So right there is, okay, you better really, really love it. The second thing is, if you really, really love it, why ruin that love by making it a job instead of your hobby? Because the easiest way to ruin your hobby is to try to make it your profession. It is frustrating. It is ultimately far from what you get in the joy of playing. It's a completely separate thing that can bring you extremely separate joy, but also be so frustrating as to ruin what you did find fun about the hobby.
Yeah.
So that's another question I have for you. Do you have anything else along those lines, Teos?
Yeah. You've gone super realistic. We could say negative, but it's not really negative. It's a cautionary tale, right? And I think that sometimes creators enter the space thinking, well, if I just work hard enough and long enough, I'll get to the magic pot of gold. Whether we're talking about like emotional gold or monetary gold, and that it's always going to be around that corner, right? And they'll look at other creators and go, oh, those people must be super happy. They look so successful. They must have found all the gold, emotional and financial, and it's all roses for them. I just need to become them. They did it. Certainly I can too. And that's one of the reasons that, like, in the Success in RPGs video series, I try to say, like, the first thing to do is really answer those whys, right? Like, what is it that makes you want to create and that will be fun right now? Like the things you like doing right now, because there is no magic pot of gold. You may find some additional things you like, and certainly things like I love working with people like you, right? We got together at Gamehole Con with some incredible creators. It's awesome to be part of those creatives and be in that space and talk to all these amazing people, right? But it's not because there's a magic thing that shows up. It's that you have to like what you have to like creating. You have to like writing. You have to like the process behind it. Otherwise, it's not fun. And you might as well be, shoveling, filling ditches for money or whatever. And hopefully game design doesn't feel that way, because that's why you chose to do it, right? In the same way that I work in the environmental field because there are things that I like about that in my day job, that make it better than filling ditches. Right? And so I think that's one of the that why is really important. And anyone who wants to get in there should list all the things they like doing and what they don't like doing, and really pursue that so that it's awesome and gives more to you.
Mhm. All right. So if you've heard our talk just now, you might be like, yeah, maybe I'll keep it as a hobby and do some things
Mhm.
on the side. Now, if you're still interested in like really devoting yourself to this, let's talk. Let's talk. My first question is going to be, you probably love games. You probably love role-playing games. Maybe that game is D&D. Maybe it's other kinds of games. So I ask, what are the skills that you are bringing to this endeavor? What are your occupations? And I don't say occupation in terms of a job that pays money, occupations in terms of the things that fulfill you and that you're good
Right.
at.
Like I'm an editor or a layout expert or whatever. And mhm.
Exactly, exactly. Uh, because those skills that you have are going to be the things that you rely on as you move into game design, whatever aspect of game design it is that you're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I like to do then is to say, can you take those skills, maybe the skills that you're honing, maybe the skills that you already have, maybe the skills that are part of your education and your current job, and mix them with games to not quit your day job, but to make your day job something that is game adjacent,
Hmm.
giving you that fulfillment of being able to interact with games while still doing what you do. So
Hmm.
if you're an educator, could you use games in the curriculum? Can you find a way to do that? If you are a communications person, can you use those skills to work for a game company as a communication expert, a human resources person, right? That sort of thing,
Yeah.
rather than as a game designer. If you're a manufacturer, can you start to manufacture things that may be game adjacent that might be more lucrative
Right.
than work as a game designer?
Yeah.
Because if you can do that, you're fulfilling the love of the game while also adding to the industry, maybe just not in the way that you had originally imagined.
Right. Right. Yeah. And staying flexible to that role you could play in the industry is important because it's easy to look at like what you run a game and you go, oh, therefore I want to write adventures. But not everybody's great at writing adventures, and not everybody enjoys writing adventures. And adventures aren't just the words, they're the editing, the development, the layout, the communications around them, the marketing of them, the paper procurement, and all the tools that you used at your table, right? The battle mats and the minis and that's where you often see success in those other areas because someone creates the Dwarven Forge terrain or the hit point tracker or whatever.
Yeah. So understand your skill set. That doesn't mean you can't learn new skills, but understand what you're good at and what you love and tailor that rather than trying to force your way into something that you might not be comfortable with
Mhm.
right away.
Yeah.
All right. So that aside, you're still going to push forth. You still want to make games, write adventures, build worlds, all of that thing. What skills should you be honing? What should you be doing your best to study? Uh, I mean, Teos and I would say, come from different backgrounds, come from different educational
Mhm.
experiences. But regardless of what you want your role to be within a game company or as a game designer, you need to be able to write and to understand good writing. Secondly, you should be a writer. And the third thing you should study is writing. And did I mention writing?
Yeah. Yeah. And you should.
Even if you even if you want to be an artist,
Yeah.
you better be able to write and to understand the written word.
And communicate. Hmm.
Mhm. And I don't just mean fiction writing, right? Technical writing is at the heart of this hobby.
Yeah.
I've probably written I don't even know, 4 million words in in the TTRPG industry. And I would say 33% of those words are not even the game stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're the outlines, they're the emails, they're the templates, they're those things that
Yeah.
function to make the writer write better and help a product get to its final state as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, and whatever role you find yourself playing, or roles, because you may develop and write or something like that. You
Mhm.
want to do that all the time. And to me, it's two parts, right? So like on writing, if you're going to write, you need to be writing all the time and
Mhm.
analyzing your writing, right? None of us, maybe, or most of us don't like reading what we wrote or whatever, or seeing our recordings, things like that. But you kind of have to, right? You must look at your writing and work on it and work to improve it. And you must have goals around it, right? To be like, mine is to always do things more efficiently, trim those words down. And I've gotten better and better over the years at having better words, better sentences, and all of that. But learning from that, right? Seeing the things that your editor gives back to you, working on those principles, learning the language of the games that you write for. The other side is seeing what's possible. So reading the best of what you aspire to write so that you know where you need to go. Someone should always be better than you. So you want to find those things and learn from them. Oh, this is how they describe this, or this is how they built that subsystem, or this is how their RPG really works. That's such a clever idea. I need to write that way or explain that way or whatever, and hone that based on the many ideas that you want coming in. And it's hard to do those things because when you spend a lot of time writing, playing and reading other things is time consuming, but you've got to do it. If you just lock yourself in your world, you're not getting that exposure, problems happen. You start diverging. And I know there are a lot of creators that when I talk to, one of the reasons I do this podcast with you, and I said yes when you asked me, was to force myself to read all these products.
Yep.
Because I talked to a lot of creators that don't know any of the recent Dungeons and Dragons releases, have not read them. And that is difficult because then you're writing for a game you no longer understand, right?
Yeah. And the same thing happened when Chris Nizak asked me to join the previous iteration of this podcast. I was like, do I have the time? Probably not. But boy, I tell myself I need to read this game or that game or this book or that book. And if I'm going to do it, I should do it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and it is painfully important and hard to sometimes fathom how important it is when you have these four other deadlines.
Yeah, and the other thing that is easy to overlook is, but especially in our industry where often we are freelancers or individuals, small companies, things like that, you have to get good at budgeting and understanding and planning because whatever your age may be, somewhere in the future is a health crisis, kids going to college, retirement, all these things. And so you need to be on top of your finances, your invoicing, your billing process, your communications with clients, knowing when a project ended so you can call it done, right? All that thing, understanding dates, calendars, all those things that are maybe boring to a lot of people are a necessary part of this because you're not just at a company doing the thing and everybody tells you what to do. You're in charge of a lot, and that means you need to learn how to do that.
I am fundamentally opposed to spreadsheets. Uh, I don't like them. My brain doesn't work well with them. I cannot tell you how important being able to use and read and create and understand a spreadsheet is, both in terms of, as you say, budgeting and keeping track of things, as well as all of the projects I've worked on that make exquisite and painful use of spreadsheets. Uh, it's an important skill to have and to learn. Along those lines, this sort of melds with what we've already been saying, but being able to look at words and concepts logically and analyze them logically. If you have never taken a class in logic, like syllogisms like if X then Y, X therefore Y, or if
Yeah.
if X then Y, Y not necessarily therefore X. Right. Those sorts of things are super important with rules design to be able to look back on something and say, I used this word here, and I use this word here, am I supposed to be making a connection there or am I not? And
Yeah.
at some point in the near future, we're going to talk about weapon properties
Hmm.
and how important those things are in the 2024 game, and how maybe they weren't exactly thought through completely in terms of logic, to the point where people are sort of confused about how to use them.
Yeah, yeah, and understanding design and math is important. You don't have to be the expert, right? You can always bring people in, but you must understand when to do that. You know, if you're not going to maintain the spreadsheet, someone has to, right? At Gamehole, we heard Rodney Thompson talking about a spreadsheet for fifth edition's math that was so big he needed a new laptop because his old one kept crashing, right? And you know that you wouldn't think of that for most role playing games, but that is what's going on behind the scenes on all this math, right? And it's why, if folks who start understanding it, it's why we get fascinated when we see like, oh, they've changed it for 2024. That's someone had to maintain that big spreadsheet, we hope, right? Because it drives that thing. And I remember asking Rodney Thompson on Twitter a million years ago something about a card in the Lords of Waterdeep game and saying, isn't this like a little broken? And I had misread the card. So I was being an idiot. I asked him this question and he wrote back something like, no, that's a 4.5 value card. And I was like, what? Like it has a numerical answer, right? Like it's
Right.
not just a feel thing. It has a strength that has been rated by the game's parameters. And when I didn't make heads or tails of his answer, but what I did was go back and, well, I'm missing something. And I'm missing something. This card is not doing what I thought it did. And he clearly has some way to validate this numerically, right?
Yeah. And the last skill is, it's hard to quantify, but being able to work on a team and communicate with a team, super important. Has a lot to do with writing, has a lot to do with logic, has a lot to do with spreadsheets, but being able to know when it's time to step up to do the thing, know when it's time to step back and let someone else do the thing, knowing when it's time to step in when someone is doing something to gain more knowledge of what they're doing
Yeah.
and help them, or get yourself right by understanding what they're doing. All of that is so important. One of the first things I say in my class is, how many people here hate group projects? And like literally everyone raises their hand. And I raised my hand too. And I said, me too. Boy, I hated group projects in school because either I was the one who did the whole thing, or I was the one who was unhappy with and trying to tell everyone else how to do it better. So I tipped the scales at both ends. But life is a group project.
Yeah.
And TTRPGs, it is very, very much that.
Or
So,
should be, right? We talked about that in our Gamehole Con Acquisitions Incorporated panel a lot. That one of the things that made the project unique was being able to work as a team and really think with three brains and often more, analyzing the challenge of the book and how to write it, and that's what made it better, right?
indeed, at least I hope.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've
I
you
want to add a
still
little
are
thing to
interested.
that. I just want to add a little thing to that, which is that there's a whole series of skills that go into this group work piece, like compassion, right? Checking your ego, working towards the good of the project, elevating others, right? All these kinds of things that go into the group dynamic area that we couldn't possibly list all of them, but those are all part of that.
Absolutely. So you still want to do it. You're interested. You've got your skills. You are learning, always learning, and you think you're ready. Time to make your splash. Time to do your thing. Okay. Good luck. Um, have patience. Find a way to create and share your work. That's got to be the first step. Do what it is that you love. Study, figure out what it is that you want to make it, and then find a way to make it public. It doesn't have to be a huge publication that's in Walmart. It doesn't have to be something that is beloved by millions. But as long as there is a way for people out there to see it, look at it, and give you feedback on it if necessary, then you have succeeded in your first project.
Yeah, the way I would always often say is just create, like create and keep creating and keep going. The enemy of any creator is that you're waiting for the perfect idea or waiting to be so good that you can finally release something. Just create. If your things are terrible, then it just means you have more room to improve. And over time, you can remove those things from your back catalog if you don't like them, but be creating. Because one of the big questions is, how do I get visible? And if you have nothing to show, then even if you're there, people aren't going to engage for long. So you need something, whatever it is, blog writing, podcasting, free stuff that you're sharing, comments on forums, whatever it is, things must come out of you and be in the space that people can engage with. So find the things you will do lots of, because if you're doing something you hate, right? If you think monsters are the hot thing, but you don't like designing monsters, you're not going to love doing that and it's not going to come out. But if you do love it, then you can become the monster person that everybody loves getting monsters from. And that starts getting you established, right?
And one way to do that is to set a very specific goal or series of goals for yourself. And I tell people that, and sometimes they come back to me with, well, my goal is to get something published with Wizards of the Coast. Don't set a goal of things you can't control. Don't set a goal of publishing here or publishing there unless you control that publishing.
Yeah.
Instead, set a goal on the work that you do. I want to create this adventure that's 20 pages with 4 new monsters and 2 new magic items. That's a goal that you can control, that you can do. You have the added bonus that you know that you can take that and you can put it on not D&D Beyond, on DM's Guild,
Yeah.
or Drive Through RPG,
Drive-thru.
or on a blog, or anywhere that you can control what goes on.
And the more you experiment, the more you then understand things, right? You publish on the DM's Guild. Well, now that's locked in the DM's Guild, can't put anywhere else. But you get to see whether that drives more revenue than another product, which you put on Drive-thru. And you see, well, how do those sales compare? But you know what? Now when I launch a Kickstarter, I can also include that as a product. Oh, look, that made me way more money. Maybe I should be on Drive-thru instead, right? That's a thing a lot of us have found over time. You find that out by doing it, sometimes by talking to others, but doing it is what really drives home that lesson, right? Or, you may not know whether you want to make videos or podcasts, and only by doing it do you find out, well, that's a lot of work, or it's not for me, or wow, I love this, and that's a place for me to really, be creative and experiment. It takes trying all these things to find them out, right? Being a freelancer versus creating your own work, right? It means managing your own projects, managing yourself if you're doing it, publishing, putting it out there, promoting it. Maybe you don't want to do that. But if you look at what freelance pays, that is problematic, right? That can only get you so far. How many projects can you realistically land in a year and all that? So doing that math, thinking through things, experimenting with different formats, not all the eggs in one basket kind of thing is all helpful.
And to do all of that, you need to keep creating, because you can't do one thing and then do 27 things with that. You need to do the one thing, as Teo said, put it here, do another thing, put it there. And that gives you a wider perspective on the world of TTRPG design. So know the current media. Know where are people putting their products? Where are people making it known that they have products? Is it YouTube? Is it Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it TikTok? Is it a blog? Is it yelling on the street corner at a convention and having a pamphlet to hand out? Maybe that standing on the corner at Gen Con and handing out pamphlets of your one-page adventure is actually the best thing you could do.
Right. Yeah.
So know that, but also think outside the box. right? Everyone has come into this industry on their own path. It's generally unique, even if it's similar.
Yeah.
Chris Perkins got there through one way. Teos and I got there another, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. You were going to say?
Yeah, no, well, on this subject of paths, there's no one path these days, but there are similarities between
Mhm.
paths, right? In that a lot of times you could round up the path to being I was working hard at
Mhm.
doing what I like doing
Mhm.
long enough that I got better at it and that people started to notice me, right? And that's the Perkins story, that's the you story, that's the me story. We did a lot of work. And as that work piled up, people began to notice it in various official capacities of the places we wanted to work with or for or whatever. And that helps you, right? It's not magic. It's not because
Mhm.
Chris Perkins sent in something to Dungeon that he became the lead of D&D. Right? That's
Right.
not the conclusion. Oh, right for Dragon. It's hone your words, get
Yeah.
good, get even better, make connections, impress the people that you're dealing with. And that's
Mhm.
where like you mentioned that, being at Gen Con handing out pamphlets may or may not work depending on what you put into it too, right? So like if I
Sure.
think of Andy Demps giving out the little leaflet folded thing, I think that's a
Mhm.
brilliant idea because he I think is at the place where not to put Andy on the spot, but he's at a place where people hopefully know him and
Mhm.
more people could get to know him and the quality of his work can carry through because he's done so many things, right? And same with
Sure.
folks like Graham Ward, who I was happy to introduce to others because folks, you can get to a point where people start to go like, oh yeah, that thing. Oh, I've heard of that. And
Mhm.
ooh, this thing you gave me is cool, right? That's where you can get some payoff from things like that. Though it can be very hard to measure, right? It'd be fun to talk to
Right.
Andy and say, what do you think? Did it work?
And another thing that I wanted to mention is help people solve problems.
Mm,
And people in this case could be players, it could be game masters, it could be publishers, it could be conventions, it could be anything where within the industry, people are working hard. Yeah, players are working hard to have fun. Game masters working hard to give their players this. Publishers are working hard to publish content. Conventions are working hard to bring in players and game masters to their show. If you see someone where there's a problem, that means there's an opportunity.
mhm.
Uh, Maybe a publisher is looking for someone to fill in random encounters, and
Yeah.
they put out a call. Create something that answers that problem. Maybe at Gen Con, a game company is looking for people to run demos of their game. That is a problem
Yeah.
that you can help them solve. So always be the one to be a problem solver if you can, without becoming a problem. And
That's
sometimes
great.
it's very easy, especially if you are very excited about something, to think you have the solution to the problem.
Mm,
And you end up overstepping your bounds uh, by insisting that you are the solution rather than offering the solution.
mm,
And I know that I have fallen into this trap. And
sure.
I bet Teos is willing
Sure.
to own up to
Yeah.
also stepping into this every now and
Reluctantly, but
then.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you don't know all of you can see the problem, but you can't see the causes of the problem
Hmm.
sometimes. And your solution isn't the solution.
Yeah.
So while being the problem solver, be aware, learn rather than insist
Hmm.
when you
Yeah.
become that problem solver.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
That's really wise.
and and this is going to lead into convention talk in a minute, but I want to also say in this problem solving, be ready to work thing, be ready to work, but also protect yourself and know your worth.
Mm,
Ideas are a dime a dozen out there. Everyone has ideas. The thing that you think is this great idea, 20 other people have right now. But what they haven't done yet is worked to turn that idea into a tool that helps someone solve a problem. And that's where your value lies.
Yeah. Yeah. It's transforming the idea into the product. That's the key skill you develop, not just coming up with ideas. I do think some
Mhm.
folks have great ideas, but
Mhm.
that's nothing without that turning it into the actionable
Mhm.
product, right? The thing that will be there and that will work. And like kind of you were saying before, like doesn't solve a problem you imagine. It solves the problem that the audience has, right? Or that the
Yeah.
creator company needs and so on.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, looking at the 2024 rules, this is something that Ghostfire Gaming already did. This is something that Cobalt Press already did. This is something that fill in any company or any
Mm-hmm.
product already
Sure.
did. And yes, maybe, but it's not a stolen thing. This
Mm-hmm.
is something that a reasonable game designer would have probably come up with. And so they are just doing what they do, which
Yeah.
is design games based on ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm going to say something that you may disagree with, Teos, but I'm going to stick by it. Great game masters are more valuable than great designers.
Yeah. I mean, sure. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, if you want to prove your value as a person in the industry, become the best game master that you can.
Mm.
That will not only help you um, be a better designer, it will help you show potential partners, potential publishers,
Mm-hmm.
potential hirers in the industry that
Mm-hmm.
you know your craft from start to finish by showing the finish first,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
showing that at the table, look at what I can
Yeah.
do for this group of players. You know damn well that if I can do that, I understand how to do it with the written word as
So you're
well.
saying if adventure is the game, then DMing is
Yes,
the design.
there. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Uh, and the last thing I want to say about this is your work might be important. It might be important to you, and it might be important to other people, but it's not precious. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it can easily go away,
Mm-hmm.
and the game will continue.
Yeah.
You can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it once, you can do it again. So don't be afraid to take something that's not perfect, that's just not quite hitting, and just set it aside
Yeah.
and do it again, but better.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And okay, now let's talk about conventions because that's where the rubber is going to meet the road here. We've talked about all of this stuff. How, Teos, how are conventions important for learning and for connecting and for showing off your skills?
um, for me, they were my introduction to community, right? And when I first started, what conventions did for me was showcase player approaches, showcase DM approaches that I had never even wildly considered. And so I learned truly what the game even is by going to conventions. Like I'd say before conventions was an era when I had such a small view of what the table could be, what the game could be. That's where my head exploded. And I saw all kinds of different approaches to adventures, DMs, all of that. All of the lessons I've learned of value, I can attribute back to conventions. As time has gone on, and I've been more working in design and so on as a designer, what conventions offer to me is still that, but also then meeting the people behind the games and getting to get their insights behind the games, which is more and more valuable because I'm fortunately in what I think is a very rare position of being able to speak to lots of people because of how many years I've been doing this. And that's very useful to me. What would you say, Sean?
I would say the exact same thing plus.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that not only is that community huge and you can make those connections, but you can make them in so many different ways at small game conventions, game days, but also at the larger conventions. So being able to sit in a at Gamehole Con as an example, sit in a quite small uh, conference room in a quite small convention hall
Hmm.
and actually ask questions of these people that are making the games, that have
Yeah.
worked in the games, uh, is absolutely mammoth. Being
Yeah.
able to sit down at a game run by one of them
Yeah.
and seeing how they handle certain things is huge. Being able to run games, as you say, for a variety of different players, as we've talked about so many times, is huge. Just getting an overall feel for the industry, for the community, might not be something that you could jot down as this is the lesson I learned,
Yeah. Yeah.
but osmosis wise, it sort of soaks into you and you
Yeah.
realize this is how a publisher talks to a freelancer, or this is how freelancers talk to each
Mm.
other. This is what a publisher thinks about when they are creating an outline to hand to a freelancer, right? All of those questions
Mm.
are not necessarily answered immediately and in detail, but you get the gist of how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I love it. I mean, especially GameholeCon is so good at pulling all these groups into an intimate, fairly intimate setting, which is incredible, right? I played a game with David Ewald, one with Ed Greenwood. Went to these panels, and you get to hear Peter Adkison talking about three. I got to ask him about why they didn't follow exactly Ryan Dancy's OGL plan, and Peter's first answer was, I don't know that I can talk about that. And then Ed Harris ended up, or Ed Stark ended up answering it. Just great stuff that you just can't do kind of almost anywhere else. And that can only come from conventions. But I will say a big caution I have is conventions are expensive,
Yes, they are.
hugely expensive, right? It's like a big vacation. And so you have to kind of balance that against, oh, I'm going to, Europe or, touring someplace. Like, depending on whether you can drive or not, your costs can be really high for a convention. So I don't advocate conventions as if you're a rising designer trying to get a start, go to conventions and it'll all work out. Like, I would say that's not the case. Rather, I would look at conventions as this is where you can learn a ton, right? Like, I played, I don't know, 3 Free League games and, various other systems that I wanted to try. And that's a great learning opportunity for me that I can say is worth that cost, because also I can afford it because of my day job.
Sure.
Like, those things
Sure.
are all important to balance out.
Yeah. And there are online conventions that you can attend that may not be as rounded, I
Yeah.
would say, as an in-person convention. Um, I treat it like sort of college,
Hmm.
right? It's expensive to go to college.
Yep.
It's costly for sure.
Oh yeah.
Uh, are there ways that you can get the same education, skills, feedback at a lower price? Absolutely. Uh, look for conventions in your area that are within.
Yeah.
You don't have to fly or drive
Right.
halfway across the country. If you have friends that can go with you and share the
Hmm.
cost, uh, and then a lot of conventions you can work at, both online or in person.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
reach out to game companies and ask if they have they'll pay for your badge in a hotel room if you work so many hours. And this is where you go back to know your worth and protect yourself. Um, companies are making money off of this, so make sure you're not being taken
Yeah.
advantage of, but
Yep.
also don't be afraid to put yourself out there to get as much as you can out of those experiences and those opportunities.
Absolutely.
I have to just add one more thing.
Yeah.
This came up during the Eldritch Lorecast live stream,
Hmm.
but as Latia Jaquise was sitting next to me at this panel, I remembered seeing her for the first time at GameholeCon a few years ago,
Hmm.
and she had just been getting into the Adventures League, and she was like becoming an organizer. And some people walk into the room, and you talk to them for a minute, and like this person has it. And I don't know what it is. It can be different things to different people. But I'm sitting here thinking of Mackenzie DeArmas, and I'm sitting here thinking of Marcelo. And I'm sitting here thinking of those people who you talk to them for 1 minute
Yeah.
and they're not pushing, they're not over trying, but you just know that this person loves this hobby and they have something to add to it,
Yeah.
and you want to tap into that energy, either as a player or as a game master or as a publisher.
Yeah.
And so just as you do these things, be yourself, but show the love that you have for the things that you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can show that honestly, people will want to work with you or have you work for them.
Yeah. Be that person that people want to work with, and you can pick that up by talking to others and seeing why do people like the folks you mentioned all come across as like, yeah, I want to work with this person.
Yeah.
Right. And figuring that out and how to, because it's hard. We can all just be in our shell and not give anybody any spark, right. But you have to find that at conventions. That's the place to do that. Right. And if you're an introvert, then you can go to your hotel room and crash. But
And boy, do we go crash sometimes. Yes. Anything else on this topic before we close it down?
there's so much, but I think we've done a good job. And yeah, folks, feel free to hit us up with questions. The Game
There you go.
Con was amazing. I could talk about it in so many ways.
So thank you everyone out there for listening. If you're a patron of the show, like our Master of Dungeons supporters, we tip our caps or press our hands together in your direction, and thank you. Master of the Realm supporters get a shout out in our show notes, and the Masters of the Multiverse, well, they get a special shout out right now. Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Dave Bastianson, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Evil John, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Sean Hurst, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, Brian King, Jim Klingler, a.k.a. DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, Mighty Zeus, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Hugnus, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simosa, Josh, and Lee Wanika at the Tabletop Journeys podcast. And I will get back to your message. Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Tres, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and the Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support. If you go to patreon.com/masteringdnd, you can become a patron as well, and we would so much appreciate that. You really help us keep this show going.
Truly.
You can also review the show on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to this show, or you can go to YouTube and ask us questions, like, subscribe, do the things. Teos, where are people finding you these days?
Find me at alphastream.org. From there, you can get to my videos. You can see the breakdown of how traps have changed in 2024 with some very interesting bits and some important clarifications.
Mm-hmm. You can find me on Twitter at Sean Merwin or on any of the other socials at Sean Merwin, and follow the podcast on all the places at Mastering D&D. So we have talked news. We have talked conventions. What are we going to do now?
Let's go figure out our quarterly report. And no matter what the result is, let's say that it was a huge win.
Mm-hmm. The huge win for me is going to be an extra night's sleep.
That's a quarterly report I want to see.
Mhm.